Hi everyone, it's Claire from Little Bee here. For those of you that don't know us, Little Bee is a business that helps people reduce their waste and live more sustainably, and we do that through our range of eco-friendly products. We started the business a couple of years ago now, initially just making beeswax wraps and selling them at local markets. Since then we've expanded into lots of other eco-friendly essentials for the kitchen, for bathroom, eco gifts and much more. We attended the Greenfest events last year, which I can honestly say was one of the best events that we've attended, and we've been to quite a few. The general atmosphere and buzz about the place was just really positive, a real feeling of togetherness. And really busy, fantastic turnout. So the Greenfest team did a really grand job at that. This year, unfortunately, we're not able to be there in person, but we're really grateful to the Greenfest team for inviting me along to come and chat with you today. So today I'm going to teach you how to make beeswax wraps. If you've got any questions or comments throughout, just drop them in the comments below and we'll do our best to answer them. There are a few different methods when it comes to making wax wraps. I'm going to talk through and show you in detail a couple of those methods today, and I'm also going to give you hopefully some helpful tips and tricks that you can use yourself as well. So the first method I'm going to show you is the iron method. Before I do that, I just wanted to talk through the ingredients that we use. Again, there are lots of different options. We spent weeks and weeks and weeks experimenting with different recipes, different techniques, different ratios, and the best option that we found was a mixture of beeswax, which we sourced from a local beekeeper, tree resin and jojoba oil. Now you can make beeswax wraps with just beeswax, however we found that it just didn't give it the cling factor that we like. So the tree resin gives it the cling and the jojoba oil makes it nice and pliable, so it means you can easily mould it around your food. As well as beeswax wraps, we also make vegan alternatives. So with the vegan option, instead of beeswax, we replace that with candelilla wax and rapeseed wax. I was really keen to either not bother or make a vegan alternative that was as good as the beeswax wraps, and thankfully we figured that out. So it took quite a while, but we got there in the end. Now onto the fabric. So we, again, being as eco-friendly as possible, use GOTS certified organic cotton. If you are repurposing fabric that you've got at home, anything that's not stretchy and 100% cotton will be fine. When we get the fabric in, we pre-wash it, so that avoids any colour run during the heating process when we're waxing the wraps. And we pink the edges, as you can see here. Hopefully the camera's picking that up. And I think it looks nicer, but also it means that the edges don't become too frayed, and it just helps the wraps last a bit longer. So let's start with the iron method. You can see here I have got a few bits in front of me. I have got a heat proof mat here. Obviously when you're making them, the obvious thing to use would be your ironing board, but I'm just using this to protect my lovely table. And then if you place a towel on top, or an old tea towel like I've got here, just for added protection. And then I have got 2 sheets of baking paper. So again, being as eco-friendly as possible, we use parchment baking paper from If You Care. So this is compostable. As well as that, I also reuse these over and over again. You might be able to pick up on the camera there that they are super sticky already. So we've used these quite a few times for previous workshops. So right, let's get waxing. So place your fabric in the middle of the baking paper, like so. You want a good inch, if not more, of excess paper around your fabric, you'll see when we start melting that it can spread. So the idea is that you want a really nice even coverage of melted wax over the fabric, which means you have to go right up and over the edges. So to save anything getting too waxy around you, that extra margin just helps keep that contained. And then what we need to do, or the first method I'm going to talk you through, we need to do this anyway, is grate some wax. So these wax blocks have been in the fridge for a short while, about half an hour or so before we started. I'd recommend doing that. It just makes it easier to grate, because this is probably the hardest part of the process. So you just grate your wax blocks. Thankfully, you haven't got to watch me grating for the next 10 minutes because I have pre-grated. If you've got a helper at home, then that's a good job to delegate. What you'll end up with is some very sticky grated wax, and you want to get pea-sized amounts like so and dot them over your fabric. And you want them about an inch or so apart from each other. I would recommend starting with a little and adding to it rather than starting with too much. You can rectify it, it's fine, and I can talk you through that today, but it's easier to add to it than it is to rectify it, really. So I have already waxed some of this wrap in advance. Here's one I made earlier, just because I didn't want to bore you with waiting for me to cover it, but I'm going to show you just a few blobs there as an example. So if you can see that, you want them about an inch or so apart, like so, and you want to cover the whole fabric. And then you get your second piece and place that over the top. And then I'm going to switch the iron on, so that's nice and ready. With the iron, you want to start low temperature. You can always up it. Obviously every iron is different, but if you start low, you'll find that the beeswax melts really quite easily. It has quite a low melting point, and you want the steam function switched off. Hopefully that is heated up nicely. So to start with, you want to just blot over all of your wax blobs, and as you do that, gradually they will start to melt. And then once it's all melted, what you'll be able to see is, I'll lift it up to the camera, you can see where it almost looks glistening and a bit wet underneath where the wax is melted. You'll be able to spot quite easily then where there are any dry patches and where you need to add extra wax to. So you just simply lift your top layer up, pop some extra wax over any dry bits, and then go through that process again. So the beeswax melts very easily, and it also sets very easily as well. So that's already set there. So what you want to do once everything is melted, to get a really nice even finish, you want to spread any excess wax over, so you've got a nice even finish. So the way you do that, if I just show you this way, tilt the iron very slightly, and you want to add a little bit of pressure as you are almost gently scraping it. So you're spreading the wax. If I show you there, then what happens, any excess wax, it will cover any extra dry bits, but also it means that the excess wax will just go off the edge into that margin area that I talked about before. And you get a nice even coverage Okay, so you need to, there's a bit of a knack to this next bit really. So what you want to do is you want to make sure that the wax is fully melted, and then you need to really quickly lift the wrap before it starts to set. So let me make sure all the edges and the corners, because that's where it becomes a bit unstuck if they're not fully melted. I think we're pretty much there. There we go. Right, so I'm going to quickly put this iron down safely, of course, and I'm going to lift my top layer of paper and then very quickly lift my wrap and give it a waft to dry it. Let's go. Right. Before it dries, there we go. And this is the wafting technique I was talking about. You just want to waft it for a few seconds so that it is set enough and cool enough for you to place down. There we go. So what we do at Little Bee, again, because it's important that we do have a nice finish on the wraps and that they look nice when they come out of the pack, we then give that the edges an extra trim, either with pinking shears if you've got them, or we use a rotary cutter because we're getting through quite a few wraps, and that just gives, again, just that nice kind of aesthetic finish, and you'll end up with some offcuts, and we use those as firelighters. In fact, we give them away to customers as free posh firelighters, and they work really well and they smell nice as well. So there we have it, our first wrap. Next, I'm going to talk through one of the other main techniques, and then I'm going to show you a couple of examples of things that you can use your wraps for. Now, I am going to go through the oven method next. So I'm in the dining room and I don't have an oven in here, but it's very similar to the process that we've just been through, and then I'll talk through the differences as we go. So the extra thing you'll need is a baking tray, and we use just a very simple, cheap, flat tray like this. Again, use a piece of baking paper to cover the baking tray. I'd recommend probably trimming it to the same size, otherwise it ends up just getting a bit messy with the overhang. And then you lie your piece of fabric on top of the baking paper. Your grated wax, exactly the same process. You want pea-sized blobs, evenly spread about 1 inch or so apart from each other, all over the fabric. And now, instead of using the iron to melt the wax, you're going to use the oven. So pop your oven on 100 degrees, and I would recommend before starting, if you can remove the top and middle shelf of your oven easily, I would do that. You want a bit of height, a bit of space to work with. And the next thing you do, once you have completely covered your piece of fabric, you don't need to place the extra piece of paper on top in this case. You simply pop it in the oven 100 degrees for about 2 or 3 minutes. Once it's melted, and it will melt quite quickly, what you want to do is open the oven door, and you want to half pull the tray out so it's still half in. And what we're trying to do is basically not let the mixture set. So with a brush, so we use a silicone brush like this. We use silicone for a couple of reasons. One is that it can clean up much more easily in between uses. but also, and more importantly, it doesn't shed bristles in the same way as a traditional brush does. Obviously, you haven't got to use a silicone one. If you've got a normal paintbrush that you want to use, then that is absolutely fine. Just might find it a bit trickier to clean that up. So yeah, if you open your oven door, half pull your tray out so it still remains melted, and then with your brush, what you want to do is brush all the way over, get a nice even finish all the way over. At that point, you'll see, okay, there's a couple of dry patches. Let's add a couple more blobs to it and then pop it back into melt. Once you're happy that it is fully covered, you give it one last final brush over to get a nice even finish. Make sure you go around the edges as well as the middle. Pop it back in for 30 seconds, and then in the same way as the iron method, as soon as you take that out, you want to be in a position to be able to lift the wrap really quickly before it sets. If you've got a second pair of hands, it does come in handy. So that's the oven method. The other technique that you can apply to both oven and iron is, instead of grating the wax, now this next thing I'm going to talk about is the way that you can get the best finish in my experience, and it's the one that's most similar to the way that we make our wraps when we're making them for customers. Now it does involve getting things a little bit waxier, which is why I tend to recommend for people making them just a few wraps themselves for the first time at home, the iron method. Instead of grating the wax, what you'll do is, using the bain-marie, you will take your blocks of wax and you'll melt them in the bain-marie. You need to be careful with beeswax because it has a low melting point and it does have a flash point. So you do need to be very careful that you don't put it on direct heat and you don't let it get too hot. Another reason we recommend the other methods normally. So use a bain-marie so it keeps it at a nice low controlled temperature, and take your time melting it. Don't try and turn the heat up to make it melt quicker. Just let it take its time. Once it is melted, again using your brush, you're going to take the melted mixture. In fact, you're going to take the tray to the melted mixture, and then you're going to paint your wrap with the melted mixture. So it will set, by the time you put your brush in the melted mixture and then get to your piece of fabric, it will already be setting. So it will look a complete mess, but you just want to get as even coverage as you can get with that first brush. At that point, once you've covered your piece of fabric with the mixture that has now set, you want to obviously remelt that and make the finish nice and even, and make sure everything's nicely saturated and also covered. So you can either use the iron to do that, so in exactly the same way as I showed you before, you would pop your second piece of paper over the top, then use your iron to remelt it, or instead of the iron, you can pop it into the oven. So again, in the oven, 100 degrees for about 2 or 3 minutes. Once it's fully melted again, half pull it out the oven, brush, 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 brush. Once it's nicely covered, take it out, lift it up and waft, and voila, you have a wax wrap. So that's the techniques that I was going to talk through this evening. Again, if you've got any questions at all, then feel free to drop me a message directly or pop it in the comments here and I'll do my best to answer it. If you are feeling brave enough and you want to actually create the whole mixture from scratch yourself, please do drop me a message. I'm more than happy to talk openly about how we do that. So yeah, feel free to ask away. If you want the make your own kits, they are available on our website as well, so thislittlebee.com. So as well as the ready to use wraps, we've got the make your own kits there, along with all our other eco-friendly items. So I just wanted to give you a couple of examples. They might be obvious, but might be some things that you've not thought of as well, of things that you can use beeswax wraps for. but also just to actually show you how easy it is to wrap with them. If you've not used them before, it might be something that you're curious about. So I've got a few bits here that I'm going to use as demos. So first up, you can guess what it is. There we go. It's our block of cheese. So this is using our large size wrap, which gives you an indication of how large the block of cheese was before we started it. And really simple. All you do is roll it up in your wrap, and you want to hug it to get the cling like that. And what it does, it uses the warmth from your hands, the natural warmth from your hands, just to cling. And that is the beeswax and the jojoba oil and the resin doing its job. I find in particular with cheese and also anything bread based, beeswax wraps keep it fresh for longer than if you use cling film or even tin foil. So as well as being more eco-friendly, they're actually more effective in a lot of cases as well. The next up, I have got a bowl. So if you've got leftovers or if you've got a serving dish, whatever it might be. Obviously this is our medium size wrap, but depending on the size of your dish will depend on the wrap that you want to use. So again, in a similar way, you use the warmth from your hands and just give it a little hug. And it will just cling to the surface of your bowl. And the same way as with cling film, you just get a really nice seal around it so it keeps whatever is inside nice and fresh. Okay, next up, I have got, these are all from our personal stash, by the way, so you can see they're really, really creased, very well used, but still do a fab job. So we use the smalls quite a lot actually. So if we've got, this is our small size, if we've got a half cup cucumber or perhaps tomato or pepper, whatever it might be, just to help it stay fresh for a couple of days longer than if it was just left without anything, we give the cut bits a bit of a wrapping. So I've got a carrot here just as an example, but you just take your wrap, fold it round and then just give it a gentle hug, and there we go. And then the last example I wanted to show you was the one that people use wraps for probably most commonly, initially at least, until they discover all the wonderful ways you can use them, but for sandwiches. So this is the medium-sized one, as I mentioned, medium-sized wrap. Our large wrap, which is what I've used around the cheese, is the wrap that is actually designed size-wise for sandwiches, but as you can see, you can just about squeeze a normal size sandwich into a medium as well. So obviously this is slightly different because the other examples I've shown you have had quite a hard surface. So with this, it's obviously a lovely soft sandwich inside, so we don't want to squash it completely. So you haven't got to squeeze it to make it cling. If you can just take your time and just gently hug it without squashing it, it will start to cling to itself. There we go. There, voila. There is your lovely wrap sandwich. And the last thing that I am going to show you is not the best shape. Square wraps tend to work better. I'm trying to think if I've got a square wrap here. No, so I'm going to use a rectangle one. So I'm going to show you how to make a snack pouch. This is the medium one that we've just been using for our sandwich. So first thing is you fold corner to corner, like so. So you've got yourself a triangle, and then you fold, you can see here, you can fold one corner in like so, and then the other corner in to overlap and meet in the middle there, like so. And then what you are looking for is the envelope. So if you can see like that, you fold the front flap down, just give it a little pinch so that it clings to itself. There we go. And if you can, hopefully you're picking that up okay, you've got yourself a little pouch. So for things like loose fruit, so for grapes, we use it for nuts and raisins, for example, or anything you want really. So anything that's loose and you want a little pouch for, it clings to itself. And then you've also got a nice little flap there that you can use to seal it. There you go. That is your snack pouch. So that is everything that I was going to go through today. If there have been any questions, as I said, we'll do our best to come back to you. Feel free to have a browse on our website, or we're also on Facebook or Instagram. I'll pop the links in the comments for you. There is a blog on my website as well that talks through lots of other ways that you can use beeswax and vegan wax wraps. So feel free to go and check that out. And that's everything from me. So thank you very much for your time. Hope you found it useful and enjoyed it. Bye for now.